Dr. Thomas! Dr. Thomas! You and your dear friends are dead! Not one man shall escape my vengeance! Not one man shall leave here alive!
Hello and welcome to Ycft. We are your hosts, David and Sam. And this week we are taking a look at 1972's Blacula, which is a much better film than the silly name, suggests. Was directed by William Crane and starred William Marshall as the title character of Blacula, or Mama Walde.
Yeah. Yes.
Now, originally, was the character going to be... the film was going to be called Count Brown, wasn't it?
Count Brown's in town.
And he was going to be... Andrew Brown, I think, was the name.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, this was in the Blaxploitation era.
Yes.
And they actually let William Marshall in on the script, and he could tweak the character to give him a bit more respect.
Yes.
And basically not make him like a caricature, and that's why the character's name was changed.
Yes.
He was made an African prince.
Yes, yeah.
And
much more dignity.
Yeah. Blacula is a much better name than Count Brown's Coming to Town.
In town.
In town. That's dreadful.
Terrible.
So yeah, like I said, this was a Blaxploitation film. We are going to go into that whole era. That's going to be a big chunk of this video, is explaining what that era in cinema was. But a quick synopsis of this. Mama Walde and his wife are visiting Count Dracula in order to negotiate. They want his help in ending the slave trade.
Yeah.
Dracula's against that, probably because it's an easy way for him to get food.
More than likely.
Also, it's like, I don't like Dracula in this, although it's a very small part of this. I don't know, just the makeup's cool, but I don't know, he's just not doing anything for me.
Yeah.
And after insulting Dracula, and realistically Dracula's the one insulting him.
Absolutely.
Dracula bites him.
Yes.
Locks him away in a coffin and curses him. So I'm going to paraphrase him. He's like, well, he acknowledges that vampirism is a curse. He's like, I curse you to have my name.
Yeah.
And Dracula gives him the name of Blacula.
I curse you with my name. You shall be Blacula, vampire.
Yeah.
And then he wakes up when Dracula's castle's been sold in the 1970s.
Yeah.
He's taken across to America. He's let loose, and he sees a woman that is the spitting image of his bride. That's why Dracula locked his bride in this crypt with him.
Yeah. Didn't turn her into a vampire.
No, so she just died listening to his screams in the coffin.
Starving to death, basically. Lack of oxygen.
And he believes he has found his wife reincarnated.
Yes.
Luva? Luva? Luva, it's me. Wait!
Yeah.
But he's still a vampire.
Yeah.
He still has to eat.
In 1970s New York. No, it's LA.
LA. It's actually a very good vampire
It
film.
is. It is.
I
It's a lot of
thoroughly
fun.
enjoy this film. And it's interesting. We have to look at where vampire films were at this point. Obviously, Universal's Dracula was well and truly like dead and buried at this point, really.
Yeah, yeah.
Hammer was struggling. But
Yes.
interesting, the same year, we had Dracula AD 72 by Hammer, which also saw Dracula coming to the 1970s. In the modern day. I'm not sure which of them came first, but obviously it would have been in production at the same time. I know this was filmed like March of the same year it came out. So it's interesting that several companies thought, right, we need to make Dracula more contemporary.
Yeah. I think it speaks a lot about how the Gothic was just kind of dying in a way as a, I don't know, like as an aesthetic and as a kind of subgenre of horror. People wanted to see more modern things. And, obviously in the 70s we get Texas Chainsaw Massacre and we get The Exorcist and we get, like these big, like groundbreaking movies coming through.
Change was a massive change in horror was about
Totally, yeah.
And an interesting thing is, look at the soundtracks too. Like this film, Blacula has a very funky soundtrack.
Oh,
and it's amazing.
And
Dracula AD 72 has a very disco.
Yeah,
I'll always
disco
remember the
It's
do.
really
I
special.
love the Dracula AD 72 soundtrack.
Obviously,
But
72, AD 72's in London as well.
It's interesting. But do you want to tell us a little bit about Blaxploitation? This was the first Blaxploitation horror movie. But I suppose a lot of you watching might not know, what was Blaxploitation?
What was Blaxploitation?
We've taken this so seriously that Sam's got notes typed up.
I really did. Like, I wanted to try and get this
Sam
right.
bought literature
literature. That is just such like a throwback to my English literature student days. I've absolutely loved deep diving into this, but it is genuinely important to know the context. But it's also really fascinating just from like a a cinema history point of view to know like how this all came about. But yeah, blaxploitation was a coined phrase that generally refers to films made in the 70s, occasionally by black people, but films made for black audiences, usually seeing black characters in familiar kind of urban modern spaces. So the phrase itself, blaxploitation, it was coined by a guy called Junius Griffin, who was once upon a time president of the Hollywood branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People. And throughout the 70s, Griffin and a bunch of others, they were working for civil rights, and they adamantly protested against the film industry's, what they saw as the film industry's distortion of black lives. So they didn't like the representation that they were seeing of black people on screen. So blaxploitation was coined. And in terms of cinema history, it's really interesting as well, because as you get to the end of the 1960s, Hollywood movies weren't really doing that well. Ticket sales were very, very down, and it was very much going through a slump. And so the powers that be thought, well, hang on, black audiences are around 30 to 40% of our audiences. So blaxploitation movies, they actually thought that they could generate a lot of revenue if they catered towards black audiences. And so that's kind of how it all came to be. There had been a few previous movies that were more focused around crime, but Blacula was the very first horror movie, and 1972. In a sense, it kind of sounds like blaxploitation was a really good thing, because it was all about boosting representation, and they were black films made for black audiences. But I guess we'll kind of talk about how there's pros and cons of the blaxploitation movement. So the good thing about them, I guess, is that they did feature black performers. As we've said, they were largely for black audiences. Some even had black directors as well, like Blacula. William Crane was a black filmmaker. Black characters are absolutely integral to the story, so they're not just token characters that exist on the periphery. Like, they actually have purpose within the story. And a lot of the storylines and the plots concern, relevant sort of social issues that were going on at the time. So blaxploitation movies address things like civil rights, they talk about women's rights and gay rights, and, amongst other things as well. So they were very socially relevant films. But then on the flip side, you could also say that most blaxploitation movies were still made by a predominantly white creative team. They were also funded largely by white production companies. They didn't really have a lot of black funders or producers. And also Griffin, he had a bit of a gripe with some of the blaxploitation movies as well, and he was quoted as saying that they were feeding us a forced diet of violence, murder, drugs, and rape. So I guess he was kind of coming from the point of view that, yes, okay, you've given us a bit more representation, but the representation still isn't quite on point. So I guess there's always sort of pros and cons about the movement itself. I think for the most part, people generally agree that, whilst blaxploitation movies can be seen as quite problematic, they are ultimately a force of good, because it did spark something with, for black people. It was the start of something more. And also, just again, from like a Hollywood history point of view, some people do credit blaxploitation as having influenced a lot of white filmmakers. And arguably, if we didn't get films like this, would we have got films like Mean Streets or Taxi Driver, Dog Day Afternoon? Some people even credit Rocky as being like a major influence from, the gritty kind of urban films that blaxploitation films were, those films from the movement. So it is really, really interesting.
And on what you were saying before about, the black people tend to be in really like good roles within the films. Like at the beginning of the film, Mama Waldy is a prince.
He is a prince.
He is there.
Yes.
He's trying to end
Absolutely.
the slave trade. Well, I think this was the first film that saw black people in that type of role within that type of setting.
This is a really interesting thing, because even William Marshall recalled when the film premiered, that he remembered people cheering at the beginning, seeing, Mama Waldy and his wife Luva as aristocrats. He's a prince and she is a princess, and they're very civilized, and they're very, erudite, and they're very, they're gorgeous looking people as well. And yeah, it was just, that was like a first for black audiences to see themselves set in like the 18th century in that kind of a position.
Yeah. Mama Waldy basically claims that Dracula, not before knowing he's a vampire, is the monster. So the white man in this is the monster.
Yes.
And his punishment for that is that Dracula makes him the monster.
Yes.
Something I also really like is, what is our other lead character?
Dr. Gordon Thomas, who's basically like the Van Helsing type
what's the name of the actor who played him?
Thalmus Rasulala. He is he's a pathologist for the LAPD.
Yeah, so very respected man, a respectful role, very smart man.
Respectable
also,
moustache.
Our two leading men in this are two very sexy black men.
Has to be
With
said.
amazing voice. And like William Marshall especially has this
have
amazing,
gravitas.
deep gravitas voice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just whenever he delivers a line, it's like, it's incredible. He controls a room.
Totally. Like, there's something almost kind of Shakespearean about, like his
I think
poise.
he was Shakespearean trained. He was a
Was he?
theatre
That makes
actor, yeah.
total sense.
He did a lot of TV. But I think he was in like The Man from U.N.C.L.E. at one point. I think he did
nice.
the Star Trek, like a side character.
Cool.
But yeah, he was Shakespearean trained. He was a theatre actor. And
There's-
you can see that in a lot of his performance.
There's a nobility about the character.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And from that opening scene, like you are on that guy's side.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's
Even
no
when
debate.
he is chomping on people.
Yeah. But he's got a tragic backstory now.
Yeah. And ultimately, we discussed this. Like, did you ever think he was going to turn? I can't remember her name.
Luva. Well, his wife was called Luva, and the reincarnation version is called Tina.
You frightened me.
Oh, no, you mustn't be frightened. Let me try and help you understand.
Is it about your wife?
You are my wife.
We don't think he was going to turn Tina. Like,
No,
this is ultimately a love story.
It is a love story, yeah. He wants his girl. He wants to be reunited with his long lost love. And yes, he is killing people, but ultimately, like,
He has to.
He has to survive. But his one true like tunnel vision goal is to just be reunited with Tina. And yeah, it's like we've seen this movie a couple of times, and something I kind of missed the first time you watched it is you kind of just imagine that, well, he's got to turn her into a vampire because that's the only way that they can be together. Like with all the other Dracula films where he has to turn his brides into a vampire so they can live
We are
together
going
eternity.
to probably spoil this, by the way, but
Absolutely.
it follows a very similar trend of a traditional vampire film.
It does. But we both sort of clocked at the same time. Like there's a line he says when he has to turn her.
Because she's been shot.
She's been shot by the police, which we will discuss that scene in detail later. And he says, "Oh, forgive me. I've got to do this. It's the only way I can save you."
I cannot lose you again. Forgive me. Now this is the only way. You will be with me. Always.
Which kind of just goes into this weird thing of, well, what was his plan then? If he didn't intend to bite her, what was he going to do? Was he just like going to let her live out her life, like into old age, and then just kill himself? So we never get the answer to that, but
We might do it. We own the sequel. It came in this amazing box set. We haven't watched it yet, but I'm very excited. Blacula Scream. I'm excited to watch it. They are working on a remake of it. Or they were. I think the last reports we got of it was like 2022 by MGM. MGM has since obviously been bought.
Yeah.
So whether or not, I think it's still in production.
Maybe.
Because it is a very recognisable brand, and I think there has been books as well. I want to talk about a couple of scenes that I really like. Like I said, for the most part, does follow a traditional Dracula story, but we get to see the investigative side of it, which I really like.
Oh, I love that.
The police don't take a ton of convincing because Gordon basically he gets the proof of bodies coming back and as vampires and shows them.
Yeah.
And I really like that. When Mama Wilde is brought across to LA, Dracula's estate is bought by an interracial gay couple.
Yes.
For the 70s, like, all right, how they are presented is probably a bit problematic.
Well, they're very like flamboyantly queer. You know, like that is essentially how
But
they
their
are
inclusion
presented.
is
Interesting. It's very important.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They do not last long, though.
No, they don't, unfortunately. They are his first victims when he wakes up.
They are a key cog in this machine of a story.
Totally.
Because one thing, like, he's going to chomp on anybody. But a big part of the investigation is that the files on these two have gone missing.
Yeah.
And Gordon wants to exhume the bodies. He wants to analyze them. Now, the reports have been missing. It's like, it was 2 nights ago.
Mm.
And there's a line where he's like, interested in how this always happens with their black victims. And the response is, well, basically, not both of them were black.
Strange how so many sloppy police jobs involve black victims.
You're getting paranoid. Schaefer wasn't black.
I imagine to a lot of audiences, even today,
Absolutely.
it's very
Yeah.
relatable.
Yeah, he just outright sort of accuses the lead detective of not paying attention to the investigation, being sloppy about it because one of the
lead
victims
detective
is
even referenced, it could be Panthers. Like, what, you've got a gay couple, a female taxi driver. It's like, what are the Panthers going to do with that?
Exactly.
What's the connection there?
Exactly.
And it seems like the Panthers almost used as a scapegoat by them.
Yeah, totally.
But for the most part, I do feel like the lead detective is a bit of an ally.
He is
and
an ally.
he respects Gordon a lot.
What is really interesting as well is if it's not for the Doctor, if it's not for Gordon pushing his belief that vampires are out there, if it's not for Gordon, actually going out there and getting the proof and going back to the detective and saying, look, this is what's going on, it wouldn't have amounted to anything. Like, the police would have been totally lost and, Mama Waldy would have just ruled all of LA. It takes a black guy to work with the white policeman to actually, save the day, essentially. Yeah. It takes a black guy and a white guy to work together, essentially to kind of, defeat the evil, which is, again, that's really cool.
Yeah. But 2 scenes, again, I really like I love the club. Anytime the club.
Oh my god, the club scene.
Isn't there? Which, I don't know the name of the band in it, but they
do.
Play their songs all the way through.
The Hughes Corporation.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
They're fucking brilliant.
But the club scene, one thing, when they're looking for, when they've accepted, there's a vampire around, they never think to look at the guy in the cape.
No, I know. And the cape is commented on as well by other characters.
Yes, that is a strange dude.
Where'd you get your cape from? Yeah.
Yeah.
That is one strange dude. Who is it? One strange dude. I gotta check this cat out again, man.
Fair to say, there's a lot of flamboyant fashion there, so maybe maybe he's wanting to incorporate into his outfit.
Maybe.
But the club scene in particular has a behind the scenes story which is really interesting.
Oh, it does. It does.
Initially was set up the assistant director.
Yes.
It was him, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It set up all the couples, we had white couples and we had black couples.
Yes.
Separately. And William Crane came in and said, no, mix them up.
Yes.
And the AD was steadfast against that.
He was like, that's not on me.
That is not happening. The argument, because you got to bear in mind, this film had an entirely white crew.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah.
Argued with the director a lot over this. Mm. This went so far, it went up to the studio level.
Mm.
But the studio chose to side with the director.
Mm.
And within this film, there are mixed couples
there are.
dancing. It's such a small detail that makes the club feel inclusive and comfortable for the characters. You can tell everyone there is there to have fun.
Totally. It's
and I think it's that's such an interesting battle that had to happen for that
absolutely,
scene.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think you'd be able to notice if all of the couples were segregated.
Absolutely.
Why would they, if they were that bothered about being segregated, why would the white people be in that club in the first place?
In the club, yeah. I was actually, it's appalling when you hear William Crane telling the story about how the AD basically just went over the director's head to go straight to the producers and say no, that I don't want this is bad. And thank God the producers were on Crane's side.
He's the director
with this. Yeah, absolutely. I also think the producers knew what Crane was trying to do with the film, and also like we were saying before, the producers had talked to William Marshall in depth about how Mama Waldy needed to be presented with dignity and nobility. So I think they knew what they were doing. They were on the right side of it. But it goes back to what we were saying before as well. Blaxploitation movies, the pros and the cons. Yes, it's great this film was made, but it was still an uphill battle. For the director.
Yeah.
Working with a predominantly white, apparently racist crew as well.
We've got 2 great scares in this. There are 2 scenes I really want to mention, because Mama Waldy is photographed.
Yes, he is.
And he follows the photographer back to her home, and it's amazing. She's got like the dark room, so we've got all the red light, and she notices that he's missing. It's like, where's the dude in the cape?
Yeah.
Opens the curtain. And
He
he's
stands
there.
out.
He's basically doing that pose, and I think they must have had him on a board on wheels because he kind of glides in on her.
Yeah.
I love it. I absolutely adore.
It's actually like a genuinely like, you know, creepy
And as he's like
moment
biting
as
down
well.
on her neck, he's like, his hand goes down almost sensually down to her hand.
And takes the
Takes
photograph
photo
and
and
crumples it.
it.
Yeah, it's a really spooky scene. I also like what they do with the makeup, like when he's just Mama Waldy, like, you know, chatting to people when he's, you know, wants to be seen in public, he, you know, he's just William Marshall. But then when he's like full vampire, they give him these really like bushy eyebrows.
And like beard kind of comes in here. I think
Yeah.
they grey up his skin.
Yeah, it's almost like a greenish sort of like
Yeah, I think it's like maybe,
pallor.
yeah.
But
I think they've red around his eyelids a little bit as well.
Yeah, it's creepy.
Very interesting. But the other scene, the first female victim that we have in the film in the
Juanita.
hospital, Juanita. She is the poor hospital attendant. I can't remember the name of the actor, but he played Weasel in Salem's Lot.
Alicia Cook.
Cook.
Alicia Cook. I think it's Alicia Cook Jr. But he's one of those like very prolific American actors. He pops up a lot.
We had a bad time with vampires in the 70s apparently. But the scene where she comes back, because Gordon asks him to take her off ice so that he's going to use her as to prove to the police that vampires are real. I often find this a slight downside. I think production, in some ways, probably budget holds the film back a little bit. Any vampires outside of Dracula and Blacula don't look that good. The fangs are too long.
Yeah, and you can sort of tell where like they cut off the makeup as well. Like, you know, the green just kind of stops.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
when she's running down the corridor screaming in slow motion, it's actually pretty terrifying.
It actually is. It's hard because they do it in slow motion, and from the moment she opens the door and like, you know, screeching and just running up towards him, it lasts too long. It's so uncomfortable. It's a great moment.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Yeah.
But when the police actually finally descend on Mama Wildy,
the warehouse, right?
Yeah, when they've worked out who he is.
Oh.
When Gordon realizes he's been drinking with this guy for a couple of nights.
Mama Waldy.
We have what feels like, I feel like if it was a Hammer film, the warehouse scene would have been the end of the film. And when I first watched it, I thought it was the end of the film, but it isn't. We have a whole of a sequence that follows.
We do, yeah.
They go to where he was dropped off.
Yeah.
Assuming that's where his coffin is, but Blacula set a trap. Everyone that he's feasted on.
His coven
is there. And they have a really, I like the way they kind of explain it's like a pandemic. It's like one vampire then makes 2, which then make 4, which then make 8.
Yes.
And you can see it because there's a lot of people there that we've not seen. It's like, well, obviously his minions have had to be feeding as well.
It's such an interesting thing. The book, this is a fantastic book. I didn't get to finish it in time for this, but I absolutely will demolish it. But it talks a lot about...
It's not just on Blacula, there's Blackenstein, there's a bunch of other films it covers as well.
Yeah, Dr. Black and Mr. Hyde. And...
A lot of the other horrors that came out after this were not treated with as well as this one.
No.
Not enough care was taken. I think especially Blackenstein might be not very good.
Production value kind of dipped. But they talk about the warehouse scene specifically, and they say it's what is particularly interesting is how a lot of the coven, the members of the coven, appear to be from marginalised groups. Because one of the characters that we do see now as a vampire is Bobby, and Bobby was one of the gay couple at the beginning. Blacula allowed him to live as a vampire and is now part of this, this coven that he's starting. And obviously he's a gay character. And Bobby targets fellow gay people, and he brings a victim back to the warehouse and kills him, who will then also become a member of the coven. And just from looking at the vampires that emerge, that kind of start descending on the police, it's easy to believe that maybe they are all from, these sort of like marginalised groups of society. But what is especially really kind of poignant about the whole scene is it's these marginalised minority groups that attack the police. We've got black people, we've got gay people going for the police. And it's, it's kind of this paradoxical thing because, yes, in that moment they're basically sort of empowered. You know, they're the ones with the upper hand, and they do take out, you know, a lot of the police as well. They actually turn one of the police into a vampire as well. But obviously, you know, they are vampires. They are now the undead as well. But it was just an interesting observation, I thought.
Some great stunts throughout that whole scene. We got like they're throwing oil on them, setting a bunch of them on fire. You got vampires jumping off like big heights.
It's intense.
It's a really well put together scene.
It is. It absolutely is.
I was like when they do like get out of it, and they are met by Mama Wilding. And it's like, at your recommendation, I moved my coffin.
My coffin.
Good evening, gentlemen. I say, were you looking for me? I guess I should have told you this evening that I decided to move my coffin, but then it was you who gave me the idea.
Interesting. I don't know why we only see this the one time, but he turns into a bat then and flies off.
Oh, he does. Yeah, he has the ability to do
that.
that.
He has all the abilities of
that's cool.
Dracula. Makes me think, like, is there a difference between your regular vampire and essentially your coven leader? Because we see at the beginning of the film, Dracula's brides are very feral.
Yes.
Is it because he particularly placed a curse on Mama Waldy that he is more together?
Maybe.
Because all the other victims, they don't talk.
No.
They're very feral.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have that stage, although he was obviously asleep for a long time.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
wonder if it has to be a curse that is put on somebody. And then everyone else is just kind of a minion.
Maybe.
That's just kind of popped into my head now. I'm just thinking like how it's presented. Because usually in other vampire films, like when you become a vampire, you do kind of get a lot of the abilities of a vampire, but not in this one.
Yeah, yeah.
Because none of the others turn into bats.
No, that we can see. At least, anyway.
Yeah. So should we talk about the final?
I think we need to.
Yeah. They basically track Mama Waldy down to some sort of factory.
Yeah, and he's hypnotised Tina into joining him.
Because that's one thing we discussed, like, why is Tina going along with this? Like, because she's scared of him in the first scene, she meets him, but then it, like, warms more and more and more to him very quickly. We think it must be just, like, the typical vampire seduction.
I think it's also part of the reincarnation thing, because it's like, I guess it's personal opinion at the end of the day, but some people might watch the movie and think, oh, she just, you know, looks like his ex-wife. But he is adamant, Mama Waldy is adamant that she is the reincarnation. And she does say, you know, like, I feel compelled to be with you. Like, I've never felt this way about anyone before. And even when he tells her, like, oh, by the way, I'm dead. I was imprisoned by Dracula. And you're my wife, and we kind of need to be together for all of eternity because it's destiny. She takes it pretty well, considering, you know. So I think the film is sort of leading towards the fact that she is actually the reincarnation, and there's something in the back of her mind, like subconsciously, that is drawing her to him. Like they are kind of synced.
Because I think they want to just escape.
Yes.
Obviously, his coven is destroyed.
His coven's destroyed. The heat's on him. No.
Gordon and the police descend on him, and it's a very interesting scene, this one, because spoilers, Tina is shot.
She's not been turned into a vampire.
No,
she's very.
This is what led to us discussing, like, why hasn't he turned her? I feel like it must be representing how
police
brutality and maybe like shooting without care.
Yes,
because
you know
they're there for Mama Waldy.
The police...
They are not there for Tina.
No, they're not.
But this cop shoots like blindly down the corridor and hits her. And that is when, the scene which you mentioned before, Mama Waldy feels like the only way he can save her is to turn her. Yeah. Which ultimately does seal her fate as well, because then she needs to be placed in the coffin.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a big part of, like, I imagine he wasn't going to turn her into just like the rest of the minions. I think she was going to be like him. Probably. But then he goes to town on the cops.
He does.
It's like, it's your tomb. Your tomb.
Yeah.
Tomb. Amazing. Yeah. He's like, you're all going to die. This is amazing.
This will be your employer's tomb. Your tomb. Your tomb. Your tomb.
His voice is just great.
It really is.
He's mad.
He's mad as hell.
Mad.
Mad as hell, everyone.
It's like, what I don't get is, because we've seen the bullets don't work, why didn't they arm the cops with stakes?
That's a really good point as well. It's like, stakes are cheap. You know, you just shave a bit of wood down to a pointy spike. Yeah. It's like, that is a really good point.
But what ultimately, like, seals the end, like, ends the story is, they find his coffin, and the detective again, blindly, like, opens up the coffin and jabs Tina, expecting it to be Mama Wildy. And she dies there.
Yeah.
Obviously, her sister is there as well, and she is like...
distraught.
Yeah.
Absolutely distraught. Yeah, she's a good character too, actually, Michelle.
Yeah, I really like her.
She is in a relationship with Gordon as well, that, you know, the Van Helsing type character. So she's been a big part of the story.
I like that they made him an original character and not just a Van Helsing.
Yes. Similar how, you know, Blacula is his own character. He's not Dracula.
Yeah, he's not Black Dracula. He is Blacula.
The film goes to great efforts to distinguish the two characters. He is his own character. Yeah. Which
I still think, maybe, because before I watched it, I just assumed that he was meant to be Dracula.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe people.
I mean, that's why I've been distinguishing. I'm trying to call him Mama Wildy throughout the whole video.
Yeah.
Because he's actually only referred to as Blacula once.
Well, you can imagine audiences at the time going to see it. You know, like they see Transylvania, they see the year, they see it's Dracula. You'd easily, you know, be forgiven for assuming that it's Mama Wildy and Louver that are going to be murdered by Dracula.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a Dracula film. Or, you know, something along those lines. But no, it's like immediately, like, we're subverting those expectations. Dracula is not a big part of the story at all. This is Mama Wildy's story.
Clearly, something that, because obviously Dracula is not around by the time Mama Wildy woke up. So there's a story there somewhere as to what happened.
Something happened to Dracula, yeah.
Yeah.
But, sorry.
And I like it because his movies definitely exist because they reference the
They
movies.
do. There's a lot of dramatic irony.
In that world, that Dracula must have existed and they made content based on him.
Yeah, it's like Bobby and Billy, you know, the interior decorators. They're really excited that they've got Dracula's like all his
seen
stuff.
All his movies.
Seen all his movies. Yeah.
But yeah, so after Tina is staked, Mama Wildy sort of just gives up.
Yeah, it totally does, yeah.
Gordon goes to get the cross and he goes, that wouldn't be necessary.
Yeah.
And he just walks out into the sunlight. Like he cannot live knowing that his wife is dead.
Well, he says at some point in the film, doesn't he, like, I can't lose you twice.
Yeah.
And he's lost her twice.
He lost her twice and he doesn't want to keep living
He doesn't want to do it, no. But it's such a poignant scene as well because it's not, you know, all of the vampire movies that I've seen, anyway, it always ends in a similar way. It's Van Helsing or it's the hero staking Dracula. Never have I seen Dracula decide to just, you know, take the noble way out.
Yeah.
Essentially. And also, there's something just quite, like, tragic about seeing him, you know, walk up the stairs, struggling to walk up the stairs and just, you know, walk into the sunlight directly.
I like how when it shows his POV and, like, it's almost like the sun's been, like, kaleidoscope to sort of affect, like, show how he must see the sunlight. He cannot bear to be in, he can't see.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, so he takes his own life.
Yeah, he does.
Obviously, he must have to come back for the sequel, but, you know, like, Dracula always finds a way to come back.
Dracula
so
always comes back, yeah.
But it's such a noble win. I think it cements this as rather unique for multiple reasons, but also just, it's a love story.
It is totally a love story. Yeah, you know, being undead, being a vampire was bearable as long as he had her.
I think.
And that's been taken away from him.
When they do remake it, I think if they could put a bit more emphasis on their story.
Yeah.
I like the investigative side of it. And I want them to still include that, but if we could have a few more scenes of there, maybe they could do some really interesting visuals. Like maybe if I'm thinking to BBC Dracula, if she like takes a taste of his blood so she can experiences her past life in a vision or something like that. I think they could do something really interesting with the reincarnation thing, like cemented as, oh yes, she actually is the reincarnated of his wife. I think they could do some really cool stuff. And obviously, look at the landscape at the moment, like obviously with the likes of like the Blackening and a post Get Out, post Black Lives Matter. It kind of is the perfect time for this type of movie to come back because there are messages to tell. Absolutely. Yeah, like, for sure. There are really good stories that they could tell in this world. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a shame we lost William Marshall. Back in 2003? It was a long time ago, yeah. But William Craig's still alive, isn't he? Well, he was interviewed for Horror Noir, which is documentary only a couple of years ago. On Shudder. So, yeah. I mean, who knows? I would like to see a remake of this, but I think this one it's a special movie just because of the movement it belongs to, you know, the time that it was made. And we've said it so many times on the channel, but, you know, like when you watch movies made in a certain time, it's the closest thing you'll get to going back to that time. Yeah. You know. And this movie did very well. It did do very well. And I think even when it did do well with even when it's reanalyzed or reevaluated today, it still has a lot of mixed reviews. Well, William Crane said that, you know, when he said yes to making the movie, he didn't just want to make a good
Blaxploitation movie, he wanted to make a good horror movie. Like, he wanted to make a movie that, you know, for all audiences could enjoy and talk about. And I really do think the guy succeeded in that. You know, the credits for this are great as well.
Oh,
Sorry, just random thought.
The opening crawl. Oh my god.
Yeah, like
really
the funky, groovy music as well as the backdrop. Yeah, it's so true. It's a brilliant film. Goes without saying that there is a lot of, you know, outdated language that's used that, you know, will catch you off guard.
So we don't believe in, like, censoring films. If we watch a film like this and you hear certain particular languages, whether it's towards the black people, whether it's towards the, you know, the gay couple, if you have that sort of visceral, like, oh, that's not okay, that is a good thing. That means that we know that's not okay, and that shows that we have come far from it.
Growth.
That's why you shouldn't censor these films, so people can recognise that wasn't okay then. We don't do that now.
We don't do it now. Listening to that kind of, like, it should never be a comfortable experience.
It's the same when people talk about, like, censoring books and stuff like that. It's like, no, we need to show that progression.
It's history. You know?
It is history. And
We've
this
got
is
to learn
film
from it.
history. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen this, like, shown on telly. It must
I don't
be.
think I have either. I think this is a kind of film that it's known amongst the horror community.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I don't.
I think we watched it on Shudder the first time.
We did, yeah.
To be fair, this Blu-ray for both of them, it has both the films, it has a little book on the history of both films in it, and both of them on DVD. It's £10 on Amazon.
Yeah.
It is so worth it.
Good quality as well.
Good quality as well. And it's absolutely worth your time. I think even if you needed to rent it, it'd be a couple of quid on Amazon. If you're interested in the history of film,
yes,
it's a really important milestone. It's
absolutely it
researching around the film is almost more interesting than the actual film itself. Like, that has been the bit that we've enjoyed the most, especially you.
I've loved it. I really, really have. Yeah, it's just like it's taken me back to.
Well, it's like now we have to do
days.
other ones because I want to get the most out of this book.
You got the book, which is I am absolutely going to demolish it, but I've really enjoyed reading what I have so far. But we'll do Scream, Blacula, Scream.
Yeah, maybe even at some point do like Blackenstein.
Maybe.
The thing is, like, the other ones are
of.
harder to get a hold of.
Yeah.
This was actually quite easy. I didn't think it would be this easy to get a hold of.
No.
And now I own it. It will probably go into my, like, yearly rotation.
I think so.
Yeah, I think it'll be my Black History Month film.
It's a good film. Like, at the end of the day, so Crane did succeed.
Yeah,
you know, he
also,
really,
William
really
Marshall did return as Blacula for the sequel.
Yeah, which is only a year later, I think.
Yeah,
as
Crane
well.
didn't return for the sequel. I don't think.
I don't know.
I can't. Again, we've not seen the sequel, so we'll find out when we watch. We'll probably watch that later this week, to be honest. But very much my intention, anyway, is this time next year we'll be doing a video on Scream, Blacula, Scream.
Hope so.
If it warrants it.
Yeah.
And we could have researched even more by then. So, have you got any more notes?
The only thing I did want to say, and I kind of called out to you, is just to tie it back to Salem's Lot again. I think Stephen...
I know what you're going to say.
You know where I'm going with this, don't you? So Stephen King, when he was coming up with the idea for Salem's Lot, he wanted to, you know, make a vampire story set in the present day, which ultimately, you know, Salem's Lot is. But his wife, didn't he, Tabitha, said, well, you can't have Dracula, like, running about in
New York,
1970s New York, because he'll just get run over by a cab and he's dead. You know, like, that's the end of it. He won't be able to assimilate to, you know, like, modern culture. Like, the exact thing happens in Blacula. Yeah. Obviously in LA, but he is run over by a cabbie.
Yeah.
Like, his first day. Yeah, I know.
And then he kills her.
So I love that.
You burst out laughing at that point.
I did, yeah.
So I think when we first watched it, you didn't know that fact.
I didn't, and now I do, and I'm like...
It's interesting all these things happen around the same time.
Yeah, because Salem's Lot 74?
Yeah.
Maybe, I think.
Did the book come out in 72?
I don't know. I
can't remember. It's been a long time since we've done the Salem's Lot.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a hot
That was a lot of information to try and keep in your head.
Yeah. 70s though, so it's like around about the same time.
Yeah, it's I
just love the irony of that. It's like, yeah.
It's true.
Dracula would be hit by a cab.
Anyone that's out of time is going to struggle with things like motor vehicles.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks for stopping by, guys. We hope you enjoyed this one. I hope you've learned something. Like, we certainly learned a lot of research.
It's been fascinating.
It has. Give this a watch. Highly recommend tracking down horror noir as well if you want to learn more about this era of cinema.
Yes.
And ultimately, black audiences saved cinema in a time when it was dying.
They really did.
And the studios acknowledged that they needed to cater to them.
This is an important film that belongs to a very important movement that potentially had a lot of influence on, you know, very famous movies from very famous filmmakers. So, you know, it's just a very... It's important that we don't forget that this existed. And, you know, Blaxploitation was a thing.
For whatever the reasons it came around, the good and the bad, the
And
steps
the bad.
forward it took and the steps back it took at the same
Yeah.
time, it's an important era.
It really is.
And we're still talking about it today.
Yeah, and rightfully so.
Yeah. So, thanks for stopping by, guys, and we'll see you next week.